welcome the man who made headlines for his daily commentary during the Aryan Khan arrest case is now behind bars himself. I'm Barkha Dutt and you're with the Mojo story. Let's take a deep dive into this breaking news at this hour. Nawab Malik, who's of course a minister in the Maharashtra government, has been arrested after 8 hours of questioning. During his arrest, he remained defiant, as you can see in those pictures, and said he would not bow down. He also vowed to expose everybody. The Enforcement Directorate questioned and then arrested Nawab Malik on charges of having links with Dawood Ibrahim's associates. Now, Sharad Pawar, his boss, has defended him, saying 25 years ago the same charge was used against Pawar as well. This is a political full circle, as it were, from Aryan Khan's arrest to Nawab Malik's own arrest. Never a dull moment in Indian politics, but serious questions arising on both sides. Mr. Malik accused of links with Dawood Ibrahim, and on the other side, the opposition saying the Enforcement Directorate is being used to choke democracy when it comes to their leaders. Let's introduce our guests on the program today. We're joined by Sandip Ghose, who's a political analyst and commentator, Sanjay Jha, supporter sometimes of the Congress party, erstwhile Congress spokesperson. We're also joined by veteran police officer who's been a Director General of Police, Mr. A.L. Banerjee. Also joining us is the former police commissioner of Delhi, Neeraj Kumar, who has a whole book out and has looked closely at the underworld, since that is at the heart of this allegation. And veteran journalist Madhavan Narayan is with us as well. Before we get started, let's play a clip for you of what Mr. Malik said. He threatened to expose everybody. Remember, during the Aryan Khan arrest case, Shah Rukh Khan's son, every day Nawab Malik was targeting the Narcotics Control Bureau. Now, this is what he had to say. Okay, you can barely tell anything there, but he's saying ladenge sabko expose karenge. In that scrum of media, tough to make out what he was saying. Let's start with reaction. Sanjay, let's start with you. There's a predictable set of responses. The opposition is saying this is vendetta. The BJP is saying Nawab Malik has underworld links. What do you say?
Well, Barkha, I will skip the rhetoric and the hyperbole and just give you one data, which I believe is a manifestation of how India's investigating agencies, all of them clearly set up with a noble purpose to find corrupt people, politicians, bureaucrats, whoever, and at the end of the day, deliver justice, which should be the way a democracy should function. But look at the state of the Enforcement Directorate. Look at this number. In the last 9 years, Barkha, 9 long years, that's almost like 3,000 days, the Enforcement Directorate has conducted 1,700 raids, 1,700 raids. Guess how many convictions have they managed to get? 9. So in roughly 9 years, such a powerful investigating body, directly working under the government of India, the Ministry of Finance, and it has 9 convictions, which is a conviction rate of 0.53%. This is the number that we should be debating today, because this is an exhibition of why the ED, income tax, CBI, you name it. I mean, even the NIA, all of these bodies have actually become instruments of political harassment and intimidation. Because if there was any truth in the content of this substantial evidence that the prosecution was putting forth, you would have had a very high rate of conviction. And you and I would not be even having this debate. Actually, in a functional democracy, because we are a dysfunctional democracy, let's bite the bullet and not try and pussyfoot around on that issue. We are debating today whether the institutions of governance, like the ED, are actually credible. And the data tells you it is not.
Let me ask you a quick question, though, before I go to Sandeep. Here's the point. 2 things can simultaneously be true, right? It can simultaneously be true that you do not believe that the Enforcement Directorate acts against those in the ruling party. And it could simultaneously be true that there is merit to the allegations. In Indian politics, one doesn't cancel out the other, right, Sanjay?
Right. It doesn't. But let me tell you this, that amongst the other investigating agencies that came into the limelight in the Aryan Khan case, was the Narcotics Control Board, Bureau, whatever it's called, the NCB. And the bottom line there is that, forget the politics for a moment, right? Samir Wankhede, everybody knows, has been responsible for framing this young man. And at the end of the day, these are institutions which are run by very powerful members of the police force. And there are some very distinguished members of the police force on your show, Mr. Kumar and Mr. Banerjee, and I'm sure they will kind of expand on this debate. The truth is that in India, the police reforms have never happened. And as far as we are concerned, they have become instruments of terror. You ask any common man today, I know businessmen and CEOs in Mumbai who are scared of the police. And the police is supposed to be the guardians of law and order, protect the common man. And now they're seen as instruments in the hands of powerful politicians who abuse power and intimidate people. So the politics is simple. The BJP wants to destabilize the government because we all know how BJP has been feeling terrible in Maharashtra for being out of power. And I would like to add one other political element here in your discussion because I have to leave at 8 o'clock. Mr. Malik is a good target. I'll tell you why. He also happens to be a member of the minority community. Elections are still on in Uttar Pradesh. And like the hijab controversy, it's good to show a powerful member of a minority community having links to the underworld.
You're actually linking this to him being Muslim
as well. Why not? Why not? Look at the timing. 8
Okay.
years the government does nothing. Barkha, 8 years. If Dawood Ibrahim is the biggest criminal that we all know, this government promised to arrest in 2015, how come they don't know about who are the people who have links to
Okay.
them?
Okay, let me, there's still time to go till 8 o'clock, Sanjay, so hang on with us till then. But let me quickly get Sandip to come in, and then we'll go to our retired police officers, very senior experts, and Madhavan. Sandip, on the politics of it, you see the problem, as it were, is that you can't escape joining the dots. This is the minister who was the most vocal voice against the Narcotics Control Bureau when Shah Rukh Khan's son was arrested. He basically ran a single-man army against Samir Wankhede till Mr. Wankhede was actually transferred out of that investigative role. Now he goes behind bars. Who's going to believe that these things are not connected? Who's going to believe that?
Barkha, let me start by agreeing with Sanjay for a change. The track record of the investigative agencies in India has been pathetic. Just as we know our track record of the judiciary in convicting people, you take 22 years in 20 years in a fast-track court to give the preliminary judgment against a particular, massive incident. So these are very, very germane in the system, and I don't think the statistics which Sanjay says nobody can dispute, but that's been the track record of our investigating agency. Mm-hmm. I'm very happy that you quoted Mr. Sharad Pawar saying 25 years ago the same excuse was used against him, the same kind of this thing. Thankfully, he said it's coming around full circle. I hope 25 years ago there was no BJP who had made those charges against him. And I'm extremely, wary of making these comments that everybody knows. If you get into the realm of everybody knows, everybody also knows how the underworld operates in Bombay. Everybody has read the books like From Dongri to
Dubai.
Yes. So they know exactly there are people who have been named in that. We know exactly how the mafia operates in various parts of this thing. We also know that Mr. Mukesh Ambani, who was one of the, I would say, the prima donna of industry, how his he was threatened by certain elements of the police, and they are getting into investigation. So let's keep that aside. Mm-hmm. Now the question, as you are saying, is whether this. So I don't think that there should be any dispute on the fact that this kind of whether it's a mafia network or drug network, etc., it's a reality in our country, and it's a huge issue.
The timing.
No, I'm saying that is one part of it. I think that we need to accept. Now, whether we cannot use Nawab Malik to shy away from that reality. Now, coming to Nawab Malik, all the points which you're saying, connecting the dots, I would grant that a detached observer, people can think it is true. But whenever that happens, where I have an issue, is sometimes somebody gets arrested and we say bail is a right, and sometimes when a bail is given to some other person whom we don't like, we say the judiciary has been arm twisted, etc., to give the bail. We cannot be having two sets of standards. Fair enough. people get arrested. So did Amit Shah get arrested in the earlier period. People could have said that is political vendetta, but he had to go through the whole process. And if indeed it is a vendetta today, and let somebody go through the process and
Okay, I think,
let's
yeah,
not put political angle is one thing, then you're putting in a minorities angle and everything else. Similarly, there's a minority angle in Samir Wankharde's case. As we know, it has been.
so let's open this up. Let's open this up. Both of you have made your opening comments. Neeraj Kumar, you spent a lifetime studying the underworld. That politicians can have links with the underworld is not going to come as a surprise to anybody. But after the credibility of the Narcotics Control Bureau was questioned for the way the Aryan Khan case was handled, and then the political figure who trained his guns on the NCB is arrested, there will be certain amount of skepticism about whether these events are connected. Mr. Kumar, please.
Barkha, there is no denying the fact that the credibility of our central investigating agencies, and for that matter, the police at large, is at its lowest ebb. There is absolutely no doubt about it. And even when an action is kosher, it is always looked at with a lot of suspicion. I remember during my stint in the CBI, I'll just give you an example, and I think that will put things in perspective. The private secretary of a former prime minister, we were probing, and we had gathered enough evidence, and we were about to register a case till it so happened that against the ruling parties, the then ruling party's uh, leader, something came up in the media, and that is the time it was decided that this private secretary, this inquiry that was pending, should be converted into a case, and his house should be searched. Now, I know because I was dealing with that case. I told my bosses also that, sir, this timing would be very crucial. People will think that we are doing it to settle scores. Uh, but they said, look, it has to be done. And the case was registered, and at some point of time, the man, I was called to a meeting in which this man was present, and he said, "You guys are going after me out of political vendetta." So I questioned him that, look, I have got evidence that you have acquired this and this property. Is it a fact or is it not a fact? He said, yes, it is a fact. I said, you have done this. Is it a fact or is it not a fact? He said, no, it is a fact. So all the evidence we had was absolutely watertight. Yet the timing was such that everyone thought that it was political vendetta. Now, here again, there is a possibility. I hold no brief for the ED. I have while I was in the CBI, I went after ED officers, and you know those names, Barkha, very well. Till today, I am being hounded for those cases. And an income tax officer who was on deputation with the ED, I arrested, and he has been targeting me ever since then in the courts of law. So in ED, I don't hold a brief for, but it is possible that the ED's case is there. There may be some merit to it, but the timing is so horribly wrong, and at the same time, the credibility is so damn low that there is no, surprise that
Yeah.
people are looking at it with so much of a skepticism.
I think that's very well said. I think you've given a very complex response of a multi-layered truth being possible. And before I come to Mr. Banerjee, Sanjay, a quick response there. That many things, as I was saying, can simultaneously be accurate. We don't have the basis right now to actually say, we don't have the basis to say Nawab Malik is guilty, but nor do we have basis to say Nawab Malik is innocent. And yes, the timing, as Neeraj Kumar says, does appear horribly wrong. All of these things could simultaneously be true.
Well, let me tell you, I think the most pertinent and hard-hitting message that I think Neeraj Kumarji has made is the fact that there are many allegations that possibly demand an investigation, but because there is such a low level of credibility of the institution, that ultimately we all believe that these are politically motivated. And that's what I said, that politicians have destroyed institutions like the investigating agencies we are talking about, because ultimately they're supposed to fight for the common man, and that's not happening. So that is an absolute truth. And I'll give you another example. Since this is at the end of the day, Barkha, let's be honest, these are political debates we are having. Whichever, whatever our views may be on governance, there are political, repercussions behind the arrest of Mr. Malik today. And what is the truth? You have also the reality. When BJP is spokesperson, the supporters say, let the law take its own course. It did not happen in the case of Mr. Ajay Singh Teni and his son, because the son was absconding for a long time. And
But the
for
son
some,
is but the son is behind bars. The son
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
arrested.
He's already out on bail. And by the way, he had 5 days to destroy evidence because he never surfaced, right? And the Supreme Court had to take over the investigation. And his father continues to be in the central cabinet. So you're finding very brazen manifestations of what I call as political, shall we say, a culture that says, damn it, if I'm in power, I will do what I like. And therefore, if tomorrow the Congress were to come in power, or a third formation will come in power, you will find that the same culture of vindictiveness will be perpetuated,
Okay,
because
okay,
everyone says,
okay,
now it's
okay.
my turn.
Okay, Mr. Banerjee, the police and investigating agencies are inexorably politicized, pulled in different directions by different political parties. That seems to be the inescapable upshot of what we are seeing unfold here. Sorry,
The,
sir. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
yes, Barkha, you're right. Unfortunately, the police department, the investigative agencies have become handmaidens of politicians. And the basic reason is the thing was mentioned on this debate, that there have been no police reforms. But let us go beyond only the police reforms. There have been no criminal justice system reforms either. Because let's take the case of say, for example, Lalu Yadav. The CBI prosecuted him probably when Mr. Neeraj Kumar was in the CBI. That's long, long back. And today, 3 days back, he was convicted in the fifth case of the Doranda treasury of, for whatever it is. Now, this will add up only in this year's figures.
But do you
That
agree? Do you agree, sir, with Neeraj Kumar that things can be simultaneously true? The timing is suspect, but the case may be valid. Do you
Yes,
agree?
yes, it happens. Absolutely, it happens. You see, things do happen this way, and I fully agree with what Mr. Neeraj Kumar is saying, that the timing can go all awry. It can make things look very bad. Like,
Yeah.
so for whatever is happening in Maharashtra government, you have the Ambani matter, you have the Vaze matter, you have the NCB matter, you have this particular matter. So in a serial, you are having so many things happening, so
Yeah.
many things taking place, that it keeps on raising suspicions.
I
Anil Deshmukh, the earlier
Home
home
Minister.
minister, is also in jail.
This is
Of
true.
course,
This is the
he's out.
second. This is
This
the
is the
second
second.
minister. That is a good point. And we've had a slew of controversies that have involved the investigative agencies in Maharashtra itself. I'm sure, Sanjay, you'll have a last word to say on that before you go. But Madhavan, let's bring you in. Go ahead, Madhavan.
Well, let me begin with a fun fact, Barkha, that a former ED official is contesting the UP elections after having resigned from the ED. What does it say about the fact that ED might have politically inclined officials as well? Let me begin by bringing another bit of statistics building on what Sanjay said. 1,700 cases, but only 9 convictions. I would love to see, Barkha, your team compiling, and somebody should deep dive into these things to see how many of them are actually politically connected cases. And at least anecdotally and in terms of impression, I can see even the Punjab Chief Minister Chani's cousin has been raided either by CBI or ED, and it has become part of the political discourse that CBI and ED are part of the coalitions. And it is not a random accusation. There seems to be at least an impression based on news reports that is significant statistically. Now, I agree that senior police officers like Mr. Neeraj Kumar or Mr. Banerjee are only speaking with a ramrod straight approach. But analyzing this, we have to look at it in terms of possibility as well as probability.
What do you make
The
of this
possi-
case?
in,
What's the first thing that struck you when you saw Nawab Malik being arrested?
Well, the first thing that struck me was actually politics. I'll come to that. I'm just trying to build it from both sides. One is the side of law enforcement, the other is the side of politics.
Hmm.
From the side of law enforcement, to see whether it's a probable political uh, witch hunt, in which case the old caged parrot has now become a trained vulture, where you're using law enforcement agencies to target political opponents. My point is that there have been a significant, statistically significant number of politically oriented raids to suggest that it might be a political issue. And I'm adding to that the Lucknow candidature of a former AD
Okay,
official. On
hold
the
on.
other hand, let me come to my punchline here, which is that I am also not naive enough to take anything at face value. So let me approach it the other way around. Let me link it up to Lata Mangeshkar's funeral, if I may say, do so. There is a silent and not so silent tug of war between BJP and Shiv Sena in Maharashtra to appropriate the Savarkar legacy. And the target here is not the NCP or Nawab Malik or Sharad Pawar, who are the known targets. The target here is the Shiv Sena. The BJP wants to appropriate the you know agenda that Shiv Sena
Yeah.
once had, and what better way than target the weakest link in the NCP Shiv Sena chain? So I won't be naive enough not to interpret that. I won't be naive
Okay.
enough.
Okay. Let's before we come to Sandip, get a quick last word with Sanjay. He has to leave the panel a little earlier than the rest of us today. Sanjay, as far as officers of the investigative agencies later joining politics, that distortion, I would say, of public life doesn't belong only to the BJP. The Congress has also had a long record of it. Parties have never been able to agree on whether this should happen or not. We've even had former election commissioners join politics. Why only investigative agencies? So let's return to the politics at play. Do you agree the Shiv Sena is the real target here?
Well, I do believe that, end of day, the fact is clear that when Uddhav Thackeray, as the chief minister, attends the meeting following the arrest of Mr. Malik, it tells you that there has been a clear attempt to threaten this government. To me, it's a little intriguing as to how a CBI can actually, needs a court verdict, or it needs the state government permission to get in and investigate people in the state. But an ED can do what they want. And therefore, the ED is more powerful, in my opinion. It has more unilateral powers. And I do believe that this is a very concerted attempt to try and make sure that the government in Maharashtra, which, by the way, has surprised people by being extremely stable, is also delivered, by the way, on many fronts, including on COVID management. And it has disturbed the BJP's math. And I do feel that the political assault that you're witnessing right now is to try and create fissures over a period of time. I don't think the BJP is expecting a sudden catastrophic collapse. You try and actually weaken the foundations, make the coalition more fragile, make each one suspect the other, that is the other one going to be a bigger political liability, and then force a compromise. So I do think that is the real political agenda of the BJP here.
Okay, thanks, Sanjay. I know you have to go. So whenever you do have to go, thank you for being on the show. Sandip, let's bring you in. Looking at this through the political prism strictly, is this going to help the BJP or hurt the BJP? There are two narratives that can play out here. One narrative is this government is corroded. Two of its ministers have now been arrested, one on corruption, one on links with the underworld. That's the charge, Anil Deshmukh and Nawab Malik. But Nawab Malik has also earned a kind of national profile for himself that he did not have during the Aryan Khan case. And, we saw pictures today of his followers flooding the streets and so on. And he's actually getting a chance to brandish his rhetoric on Twitter again and saying, hum sabko expose karenge, hum kabhi nahi jhukenge. People who didn't know Nawab Malik, now suddenly everybody knows Nawab Malik. Which way is this going to play out?
See, Barkha, there are two parts to it. I'm not a lifetime Mumbaiker, but I've spent more than 25 years in Bombay and Maharashtra. In one hand, you see a lot of things which are acquisitions with people like Nawab Malik and others. I don't think people, the real Mumbaiker or Maharashtrian, would really be surprised. Another matter, they may not bother, they may not care. So to that extent, it's not a question of Nawab Malik becoming a hero. But the point which you are saying about BJP's own credibility, I think that's a big question, even in my mind, as somebody who you frequently introduce as a Modi supporter, because BJP has not carried through a lot of these actions across the country. Ever since it's come from 2014, there have been several such raids or prosecution or initiated, but none of them have been followed through, which does unfortunately give an impression that many of them are politically motivated. Along with that, I must hasten to add this is the phenomenon not just of BJP. Today, unfortunately, even state governments are indulging in those sort of actions against a lot of people who are not necessarily aligned to them. You may or may not agree. Say a lot of us feel that what happened to Republic was not necessarily very kosher either. And at that point in time, a lot of people who ought to have gotten didn't. But today, the facts are coming out that there was also an element of vendetta, element of arbitrary action happening there, and it has been happening in different forms in different states. Whether you say somebody being arrested for a tweet or somebody being, something they've said on social media, all that is happening, and this is a very, very dangerous trend. And my disappointment with Mr. Modi and Mr. Shah to that extent would be BJP. CBI was already, people were talking of them being a caged parrot, etc. Now, you have to do something to restore its credibility. So neither have we moved towards police reforms, nor have we established that these institutions are truly independent. They are, like as you say, they're not only fair, but seem to be fair. I think those are definitely questions which the government needs to come.
Let me before I go back to our police experts, go ahead, Madhavan. Go ahead. You wanted to come in, Madhavan. Madhavan, can you hear me? Okay, Madhavan, I think can't. Okay, Madhavan can't hear me. We'll reconnect to him.
Hello.
Oh yeah, I can. Okay. Go ahead, Madhavan.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that I agree with Sandip Ghosh on the Republic TV case, much as we despise the kind of journalism that, has happened. It's important to remember that political vendetta can come from any party. So it's very important. Now, this is my appeal is to people like Mr. Neeraj Kumar and Mr. Banerjee. How do we actually stop this? We need to have a process by which officials sworn to secrecy must recognize that their secrecy is in the interest of the state and institutions. It's not in the interest of any political party. We want kiss and tell books from retired police officers. We want whistleblowers. We want institutional credibility of the steel frame restored, and it's not going to happen by a random appeal to morality. It has to happen through, we need awards for whistleblowers. We want people who will come. There should be a fear among politicians that tomorrow, if I misuse the machinery, somebody is going to,
I hear you. I hear you. I think only people inside the system can expose the system. So, Neeraj Kumar, let's take this to you. The real danger, and then to Mr. Banerjee, of what's happening here is that Dawood Ibrahim has come to be some sort of almost farcical joke in our public discourse. Every few years you hear he's dead. We don't know. He's been killed. We don't know. Then every few years, somebody is linked to him. Then nothing happens to that case. It occupies the headlines for a while. There is almost a kind of normalization of the Dawood reference. It's reached a point where nobody takes it seriously. So this extremely serious thing of gangster warfare is today totally non-serious. Neeraj?
Barkha, Dawood is quoted to have said, famously said, after the Latour earthquake, that thank God people are not blaming me for the earthquake in Latour. So it is a fact that for every damn thing, Dawood Ibrahim is brought in, because once Dawood Ibrahim is brought in, then people can say, "Oh my God, people are linked to Dawood Ibrahim," and that is you don't require any further evidence or any further supporting facts to espouse that cause. So the point of the matter is whether Dawood Ibrahim is linked with this case or not will come later. But what is certain is that Sardar Shah Wali Khan, from whom the land has been purchased in the document that has been quoted by the ED, was an accused in the Mumbai blast case, and he is still behind bars and he is undergoing a sentence. That is for sure. Uh, and there was another thing that my fellow panelists said that I wanted to react, but somehow I've lost track of it. But the fact of the matter is that in this case, the underworld link is there, and that is the link of Sardar Shah Wali Khan, who was responsible for wrecking various targets on behalf of Tiger
So,
Memon.
so you're saying that prima facie, I just want to bring up that letter again because the release from the Enforcement Directorate, can we just bring that up again? The release from the Enforcement Directorate does not actually mention these specific details so far. And in fact, Neeraj, this is so funny. The person who's released it is also called Neeraj Kumar. I was just paying. I was just reading it carefully, and for a second I got confused. That have I gone back in a time machine? but one of the things that is important is, Mr. Banerjee, when these arrests are made, I think there should be more information in the public domain. For example, Neeraj Kumar is explaining this particular man who was arrested on links with Tiger Memon. Today's generation doesn't even know about these blasts that took place in the 90s. Or, they just hear Dawood Ibrahim as a sometime headline. And that also hurts credibility. If you have enough information to make an arrest, please place it before the people. Mr. Banerjee, you're on mute, sir. Sir, you're on mute. Mr. Banerjee, you're on mute, sir. Aapka mute on hai.
नहीं मैंने ऑन नहीं किया है यार.
We can hear you now. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Chaliye.
What I was making a point saying that we tend to forget very soon and very fast. Now, look at the Americans. When they had this attack in New York, they went after whoever did that. And of course, whether they succeeded or not is a different matter, but they have not forgotten it. And they're not likely to forget it for the next 200 years or 300 years till they get back their pound of flesh. Indians, on the other hand, in India, forgetting is a national pastime. You see, you just showed us the photographs of a young man who was taken in by the NCB, etc. Around the same time frame, probably within 48 hours of what that was happening, a much larger narcotics haul was made. How many of us remember that? How are we going to follow that up? And secondly, one of the things that is going to we'll have to think about it very soon is a criminal justice systems reform. Now, Mr. Lalu Yadav, he has been convicted after more than 15 to 20 years in this particular matter. Do you really need to discuss a case, or do you really need to hear a case, or do you need to put a case on trial for so long for it to come to conclusion? Can't we have something better? Can't we have something better system, better criminal justice system, as the Justice Valimat Commission reported and others have reported? You said you want to bring back credibility. How can you bring back credibility without any kind of reform? You have to have the reforms, and only then the credibility will come about.
I completely agree with you on the last point, and also on forgetting being a national pastime. I think I'm seeing Mr. Kumar's hand go up. Go ahead, Mr. Kumar.
Yeah, that point I remembered. Fellow panelists mentioned that more officers should write in their memoirs what all transpired while they were in service. I just wanted to inform him that very interestingly, there has been a government edict issued recently that government officials cannot write memoirs after they retire, and if they do, their pensions will be stopped.
That's such an important point, actually. Even if there were a cooling off period, and I can imagine that, there are, especially for intelligence officers, there are assets still in play. So you should have a cooling off period. At least some period has to come. All countries declassify, the inner workings of government. Madhavan, I know we've gone into a very philosophical
Very,
space.
very quick point.
One,
I
Yeah.
think
Oh,
every nation can succeed only if the institutional memory is there to support the institutions. And memoirs are a very important part of the institutional memory. So I think it's very important for officers to go to court. Uh, there might be a cooling period, I understand, but there cannot be an outright ban on this. And there
yeah.
should be attempts to publish. Publishers should be more bold on this also.
Okay, I want to bring the focus
one,
back. Sandeep, yeah, Sandeep, go ahead. Sandeep, go ahead.
since you are reminding people of history, you should also remind them that Nawab Malik was also once upon a time a Samajwadi Party member, and he got elected by Samajwadi Party in
That's
Maharashtra and expelled from that party.
okay, fair. Now, I want to, in the last set of comments, return the focus back to the case itself. Now, the allegation is the following, which, Neeraj Kumar was referring to. The Nawab Malik's family bought 3 acres of land from Dawood Ibrahim A. Shah Ali Khan. The land was sold by the two to Solidus, a company that belongs to Malik's family, and Faraz Malik is the person who bought this property. So these are the details that have been placed forth by the ED. So Neeraj Kumar, I don't know. I don't know anything about this. You have verified to us that Shah Ali Khan was linked to Dawood Ibrahim and the bomb blast. The purchase of land, is that prima facie something on which a case can be built?
No, that is again a very curious point because Faraz Malik is the son of Nawab Malik. Now, if the son has bought a property, you are arresting the father. Why are you arresting the father? You are assuming that it is actually the father who is buying the land. Now, all these things will have to be dealt with on merits, and we have to wait for the courts to decide. Unfortunate part, as has been mentioned earlier, that even the courts have lost credibility completely, and the verdicts that come out, people take them with tons of salt.
Yeah. And that's an interesting question that's also being raised, Mr. Banerjee, that the son, Faraz Malik, is the one who purchased the land. I'm saying, let's say that money route does go back to Nawab Malik, because in families, often it's collective money. Is the purchase of land from somebody who is, as Neeraj Kumar verifies, linked to the bomb blast, does that make a case for legitimate arrest?
I don't think so. I don't think so. The whole thing seems to be a little made up. If, as my previous panelist was saying, that because he's the son and he has brought it.
But he's a co-owner. He's a co-owner of the company that purchased the land.
No,
that is what we mean.
Nawab Malik ceased to be the co-owner of the company since 2019 when he became a minister. He's no more co-owner.
At the point of purchase, at the point of purchase,
Sorry.
yes.
You see, we don't know the facts, since this is a case of laundering, allegedly laundering Dawood Ibrahim's money. In these sort of things, you have to establish the nexus. Buying land at an understated price or whatever, these are part of the drill. So, but without knowing the absolute.
No, I'm saying I have no idea. I'm saying none of us have any idea. We just have what has been placed in the public domain by the Enforcement Directorate. Mr. Banerjee, I'll let you complete your points, sir. Please go ahead.
I think I've been derailed somehow, but I feel that until and unless more details are available in the court, when probably Nawab Malik will be putting up his bail application, that is the time we'll get to know much more about the whole thing as to what.
Fair enough. This is very, very early sort of framing of the details yet. A quick 30 seconds to Madhavan and Sandip. Politically, I'm interested. I think the police officers have spoken, acknowledge the absence of credibility, integrity, reputationally that investigative agencies are going through. Politically, what's going to happen? Madhavan, quickly.
I think it's very clear. The politics is of imagery and not information. Information is what, and institutions are all we've been discussing for the past 30 minutes. But imagery is very important in politics. So linking someone to a Dawood, it's a sort of a dog whistle politics in which a certain imagery is created either against a party or a politician or sometimes a community, which together create a political sort of a capital for a party. The fact that the BJP has officially spoken about the arrest itself shows that it wants to politicize the case. And therefore, let us not be naive enough to imagine there is no politics in this case.
Of course, I think there's politics at the heart of it, and I'm intrigued to know which way the politics will go. Sandip, last word to you. You're on mute, Sandeep. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Whether this will have an impact on the politics in UP, as we are all alluding to, I have my doubts. But at the same time, whether this will be used or quoted in those sort of things, I'm again I'm fairly certain that it will be quoted. Now, whether it makes swings the needle.
I mean, the Prime Minister spoke in his own speech about bombs on cycles. He was referring to Samajwadi Party. Nawab Malik was a member of the SP, as you pointed out. The politics sort of writes itself. Let's not be naive. There is deep politics at the heart of everything that happens in India. We have to separate the police from the politics. I think that's the point Neeraj, Kumar and Banerjee are trying to make. We'll leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you and see you tomorrow for our audience. This case isn't just, the last word on it hasn't been spoken. There's a lot more coming up. So see you tomorrow, same time. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.